Hey, this is Derek. So it's a couple of weeks later. It's mid-December. Last month, I posted a video series about writing my Nanowrimo book, which is writing a book in a month. So I tried to kind of go through the process of how I plot and how I write a story. But now I'm making a little mini-series on the editing part. So I focused on some other things for a while. When you first finish a first draft, I think it's probably a good idea to take a little bit of break. I did some business stuff, fixed up some of my websites. Now I'm really excited to get back into the story. So I'm showing you what the book actually looks like now that I've put in my month. And I worked, a couple hours a day, sometimes maybe 3 hours a day. I tried to hit about 2,000 words a day, which is 6,000 a month, which is enough. I have, you can see down here, about 56,000 words. So that's a fine start. I'm actually going to be adding a lot when I go through my revision process. My first draft is usually really rough, and I skip a lot of things. So I've skipped whole scenes, whole chapters even, but the important thing is figuring out what happened. So the first draft is all about going back and forth and figuring out the pieces, what has to happen when. And so by the time I get to the end of it, if I push through it, I have a pretty good idea of what happens. This outline is not going to change hardly at all, I think, once I go through the editing process. So that's one of the huge wins, because a lot of people, they finish a book and they stumbled their way through it and it's kind of broken and they're going to have to fix and rewrite and change and move things around, which is why it's really difficult to go through an editing or revision process. That's why a lot of writers give up or they quit or they just never finish editing, because they know it's a broken story and they don't know how to fix it or how to put it back together. So what I do when I'm writing my first draft, every time I get stuck, I go back through and I try to plot it out. So at the beginning of here, I have my notes and research. This is just random stuff I've copied from the internet. So all this stuff has to be pulled out. These are all the scenes and stuff that I want to happen. Here's just some little notes to myself, like, did I forget about this idea? Do I want to use this? Here's something else. A lot of this stuff made it into the plot already. Some of it hasn't. I'm not ready to delete these yet. I would be tempted to go through and delete all the crap in this first revision, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute, but I'm actually going to leave it because until I go through it the first time, I may want to use some of this stuff. So I'm going to go through my first draft, my first revision process, and kind of show you what that's all about. And then on the second time I go through it, I'll look through this stuff and see if I can add anything else in or build it out a little bit more. I also have this outline that I've stumbled my way through several times. I didn't quite get to the end of it. Then I have my main points, these are the main things that happen in the story. These are the twists and reveals that I have to put into the story some way at the right time so that, they're powerful and they have an emotional appeal. This is kind of like the ordinary world. I sketched this out when I first started, and this was kind of all the stuff that went into my first chapter. And then I had some notes on my inciting incident. This was still early on when I was still kind of figuring out what was going to happen. I don't think I even made it all the way through my outline when I started writing, but I had enough to know where the first major turning points were. So then I have some notes in my outline over here. You'll see I'm already over here. I have these main 8 points that I try to hit when I'm writing fiction. So I have and these aren't even, I don't think, labeled totally correctly, but it's kind of just a place where I can kind of get an idea of the major pivotal scenes that are going to be in the book. And I try to kind of sketch those out. So even if I don't have a really detailed plot outline for the entire book, I kind of at least know the main points that I'm trying to hit, why they're emotionally relevant, why they're huge twists, how they come to be. Then the process of the novel is just getting the characters through these hoops, basically. I know what I want to happen in the middle. I know what I want to happen at the end. So I have to invent reasons for my characters to keep moving in that direction, to have motivation to get there, and also to have conflict and stumbling blocks, because they can't get to the stuff easily. They have to decide where to go, but they have to be thwarted in the attempt. So this is just kind of like a basic outline. And then here I started outlining a little bit, But then if you've watched my other series, you know what I did this November was I write on my iPhone in a app called IA Writer using a Bluetooth keyboard. So I can go out. It's a really, really easy, lightweight setup. I can go anywhere and I can just get my keyboard out and start writing. That was great for me. I got more words easier, I think, than I usually do. So I'm really happy with that. And then I just dumped them in here. So I didn't even figure out like where all the chapter breaks go or what happens in this chapter, that chapter. That's something I have to do now. So this isn't really organized. I can't really jump around. Like now I've done the first couple chapters, but the rest of it, if I scroll through, it's basically a big info dump. There's a lot of stuff I just skip over. There's some dialogue, there's some action. Like I said, most of the stuff is in the right space, but there's also just a lot of notes. Like this, a lot of it isn't even written yet. Like I know what goes there. I have like the placeholder, but I have to actually finish the scene, write the chapter, close it up, and then, you know, as I go through, clean it up and get rid of all this junk. So that's what it looks like right now. And it's like 56,000 words of that. And this is my first edit. So when I do editing, I like to go in 3 stages. And this is a what, how, why method. I don't know anybody else who uses this particular method, but this is basically how it works. So I go through in 3 big revision passes. I read straight through from the beginning to the end, and on each pass I'm cleaning and fixing things. If I see any typos, I'll fix them. Punctuation stuff like quotes around speech marks that probably got left out of the rough draft, the first rough draft. So in this first editing stage, because it's just rough notes, I have to do some actual writing. I'll write some notes here. I have to finish the scenes, remove some of the crap. But basically I'm focused on what actually happens. So what happens in the plot. I don't need to focus so much yet on what the characters are thinking, or I don't really need to build out the slow stuff. The slow stuff is usually background, character emotion, motivation, scene description, and setting, but that stuff I'm all going to do later because I don't want to go into the details of like what a room looks like if I decide later they're not going to be in that room, or if one of the main characters, you know, isn't in that scene or whatever. So I don't want to go too finely into the descriptive details yet. I don't want to build up the scene. All I want to do is clean it up and make sure that what happens is in the right place. By the time I finish this first edit, first revision, it'll still be pretty messy because I'm actually still going to skip a bunch of stuff, but it'll be pretty clean for me personally. Right now, I barely know everything that happens. Like in the final battle, I didn't quite even get to like the final scene of the book. I basically know what's going on, but I didn't quite write it yet. And there's a lot of stuff I skipped over, so I don't really know how it all fits together. So going through the first time after I have my rough draft, and I would probably say like the very first rough draft is your shitty rough draft, which, like I said, could be mostly notes. You're skipping over things. It's a mess. It's a shitty rough draft, but it's important to have a shitty rough draft so you can get the things in the right place before you start cleaning it up. So I have my shitty rough draft done. That's what I spent a month doing. Now I'm editing and revising, and so I'm going into my personal rough draft, and this just means now I'm going to finalize some things. So I'm going to make some choices. I'm going to flesh out the scenes that I skipped over and make sure they're there. I'm going to get rid of the notes to myself, or a lot of them. I'm also going to start adding some notes. So if you scroll down like to this one that I've already done, I basically cleaned it up a lot. I've removed like all the extra spaces and I fixed the punctuation. So it's like almost readable. And then I've asked questions to myself. So if there's anything that I don't know or question, I'll circle back to it. You know, like what was this guy's name? Something I need to, this is book 3 of a series. So I had to go back, you know, if there's something I need to find in book 2 or book 1, something to go back and look up and make sure I've got it right. So kind of questions to myself or notes about things that like, you know, I'm going to have to solve later, but I don't really want to solve big problems right now. I don't want to be adding details right now. I'm just trying to clean it up. So I am also writing a little bit. A little bit like if the scene is completely empty, maybe a little bit of body language between dialogue, so it's not just like a straight dialogue dump where it's like he said, she said, he said. You know, that you break it up a little bit with a little bit of description or a little bit of movement. Movement really helps a lot with emotion, especially. So especially from emotional scenes when you have your main character thinking about stuff, a few sentences can go a really long way. So I'm cleaning it up. I'm also adding a bit, making it like still not quite good enough for somebody else to read, but it's good enough for me to read it. It makes me confident that everything is, you know, in the right place at the right time. So I've done today, and today was the first day that I got this out again. I've done, I think, 4 chapters. Chapter 5, I almost got to the end of chapter 5. So that's actually pretty good because this, I don't have it written down. My chapters tend to be about 2,000 words. I shoot for 2,000 words. If it's like 3,000 words, that's fine. You want to end the chapter where it needs to end on the height of the drama. So, you know, I don't set like a necessary word count for each chapter, but generally between 2,000 or 3,000 words with 2 or 3 different scenes in each chapter, which means for like a 60 or 70,000 word book, there are probably about 30 chapters. So that's probably going to be true. I think in my chapter outline, I have like 25 chapters. Like I said in the first draft, I didn't even have the chapter markers. So part of what I need to do, this is one that I just basically finished editing, although I need to tighten up the end of this chapter a little bit. I'm really excited about this chapter. This is the next chapter that I haven't edited yet. This is what it looks like. So this is going to be the next step. But if I can edit 5 chapters a day like this, that means, you know, in 5 or 6 days, I'm going to have a clean personal rough draft. I'll go back here, which means a pretty clean copy. It's not quite clean enough for beta readers. I probably wouldn't, you know, send it out to anybody yet because there's going to be lots of typos. There's still going to be some problems. I'm also probably going to skip over things, and I'm going to be adding a lot of notes to myself, like things that I can fix or I can rewrite or questions that I have, things that need to get solved. So right now I'm going to avoid like the big problems when I come to them, but I'm going to try to fill in the scenes as much as I can and clean it up as much as I can. That's the what stage. So hopefully if I edit, you know, 5,000 words a day, then in about 6 days, I'll be done with this stage of the revision process. Actually, I got that wrong. 5 chapters would be more like 10,000 words. And normally, I don't actually edit. Yeah, I guess that's about right. I timed myself earlier, like last month, and I think I edit like 2,000 or 3,000 words an hour. So this is basically like three or 4 hours of work, and I can edit 10,000 words a day, which is great. I could write that fast, like in the amount of time. I know I can write 3,000 words an hour. So if I sat down for 3 hours and I wrote, I should be able to get to like 10,000 words a day. I haven't been able to do that because for me, when you're writing your first draft, especially, and you're kind of exploring your way through it, it's hard for me. Like if I get, you know, 4,000 words or 6,000 words, that's a great day for me. I'm really excited about that. And that's a lot more than I used to be able to do. I'd like to push up. But anyway, this is about editing. So in a day, I could do 10,000 words. In about 6 days, I could probably have a personal rough draft. So I'm going to keep going through and finish this stage of editing, clean it all up. I'll keep note, you know, it might take 6 days, it might take less, but when I get through it, I'll make the second video on the next stage of editing, the second stage, which is how, and I'll tell you all about that and what happens next.